Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man of the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now today, as you've seen from the thumbnail and stuff, I want to talk about the DCEU, and mostly because I wanted to make this video anyway, because of the whole creativity by committee thing, and if there is anything in the movie world at the moment that is doing the whole creativity by committee thing and seeing it be substantially detrimental to them, it would probably be DC. But there's been a little bit of news that's come out about some of the movies in this franchise, most prominently the Justice League, which we'll get onto in a bit. But as a result, I want to talk about the DCEU, how it's been working, what they've done well, because there are things that they have done well, and where things have fallen down. And as a result, we'll go through it by each movie. We'll have a quick chat about them, and then we'll move on, and we'll maybe see what we can learn, whether or not, where we can see that the creativity by committee, the kind of crowdsourcing of various ideas to try and make a thing work, just to compete with a competitor who has had a head start, Marvel, and the catch up that DC seems to be continually trying to do on them for no reason whatsoever. We'll have a chat about that as we go. But also, it is incredibly muggy and warm here today, even though it's raining outside. In which case, I have my window open. If you hear hissing as cars go past and stuff like that, I apologise. But otherwise, I would not be able to cope being stuck in here today. So, without further ado, the first movie, the one that kicked off the entire DCEU, even before the DCEU was really a thing, was Superman, the Man of Steel. And, ultimately with this movie, I felt that this wasn't that bad. I would actually personally say that of the DC movies so far, this was the best. Yeah? Because obviously I've not seen Wonder Woman yet, I've not seen Justice League yet, but of the three movies that we've got so far from the DCEU, I would say that this one was the best because it just went for a straight origin story, which granted it's Superman, we didn't really need that, but there was some reinvention in there in places as well. We had the carry off of General Zod with the kind of slightly different take on both Superman's weakness and how his powers work and how some of those things go on, and how other Kryptonians kind of worked and reacted to being on Earth. And granted, whilst the end of the movie was, mostly criticised for basically turning into a Dragon Ball Z-esque kind of super fight that just spanned not just Metropolis, but the entire globe with all those terraformers that were being dropped in, it did become a bit huge all of a sudden at the very end there. But at the same time, it introduced a lot of tension. It introduced a set of ideas of like the new superhumans, or the metahumans that may or may not be around. You've got the interaction with the cosmic through Zod coming down with his other Kryptonian buddies. There was a lot going on in that, and obviously, if you need something to generate enough conflict for other metahumans to be coming out of the woodwork, be they good guys, be they bad guys, be they somewhat indifferent, that conflict needed to be there. So having the big kind of, he has raised Metropolis to the ground almost, I felt like that was an okay setup as a kind of stepping off point towards something bigger. That didn't bother me so much, but obviously there were still some issues with the movie. There was a little bit of inconsistency with like how suddenly the story got so big. There's a lot of really odd escalations in there, and it was just really kind of strange and interesting to see how they decided to dial it all up from like 0 to like 11 in one go. But again, part of me feels that the reason that was done was because they're trying to do catch up on Marvel. Like Marvel had lots of its little movies that then built up to the first Avengers film, which was a big turning point there, which then allowed for the greater expansion as more superhumans of various sorts came out of the woodwork. Both in terms of most of the Netflix series reference the incident and so on and so forth. So having the big conflict there as a kind of kicking off point for greater kind of story diversity and newer characters and threads and things like that, that's not a bad thing. It's just the fact that they seem to do it all very quickly with Superman. You've got a movie that's a couple of hours long, and by the end of it you've got this big jumping off point, when if you look at the slow burn kind of approach that Marvel took, you had at the very least kind of a good number of different kind of origin stories and things like that, and even just movies that were now are kind of just counted as connective tissue. You had a lot of those just coming in and picking up and running with it straight away, but much smaller, so it was a much slower burn over the whole thing. But anyway, now let's move on to the ones that came afterwards, and some of these are not good, and the next one is the one that I had the biggest issues with, to be honest, and that was Batman versus Superman. And one of the reasons why I have such a big issue with this this particular film is because I'll admit I'm one of these people that likes both DC and Marvel, but for different things. And when I'm looking at the DC movies, firstly, they seem to be, as said, playing catch up. They're not focused on telling their own stories. They're focused on telling stories that will allow them to kind of match up or compare with their competitor, which is why they're losing the race. You had Civil War coming out and so on and so forth for Marvel, and they had this big lead on everything kind of progressing towards that point. And then you've got DC rolling in with Batman versus Superman. But here's the problem. It wasn't just Batman versus Superman. They also threw in a collection of supporting characters and like cameos and hints and things that kind of alluded to the greater storyline very, very quickly. The character of Lex Luthor, which, like, I don't fault Jesse Eisenberg for his acting, but I do fault the way that the character was written, because you've already got a Joker in this universe, and he was a kind of, he wasn't as much a mastermind as he was just an unstable brat, which bugged me. But now my biggest issue with it is that you've rolled together, I believe it's The Dark Knight Returns, which is the Batman versus Superman, like old man Batman in his metal suit versus Superman. You've got the death of Superman, where Doomsday kills him, but also Superman kills Doomsday, which, by the way, is one of my favourite DC kind of story arcs, just because of the fact that there was so much movement as a result of that event. And then you've also got things to do with Lex Luthor being revealed, with the Steppenwolf bad guy for Justice League being brought up. You've got all of these other things. You have the death in the family being hinted at by having Robin's costume with the spray paint all over it in the Batcave, and so on and so forth. There's so much that they've kind of crammed into this one movie, instead of trying to pace it out, trying to let each story have its own chance to kind of breathe and show what it's got. Like the death of Superman in the DC comic verse is such an impactful event, that spans all manner of different areas of the DC universe. But here it's reduced to like a final punch at the end of the movie, effectively, and a little, like, some dirt floating off a coffin suggesting that maybe he's not dead. It's a really kind of ham-fisted way of doing it. But again, it's this rushed kind of, what do we need to do? We need to do all of these things, and we need to compete. We need to work to show the public, and to make as much of a kind of monetary grab as possible as a result of us doing all of these things. And that was detrimental, I feel, in a big set of ways, especially even for their setup for later movies. But then you had this one, and this one was polarized, more so polarizing from what I saw in a lot of ways that I didn't expect, because it was a fairly kind of okay-ish kind of meh movie in my opinion, and that was Suicide Squad. And here you had a setup for a whole load of villains, and that's fine. You had a setup for the Joker and Harley Quinn, and you had the mystical element of the DC universe unfolding a little bit more, and more so in fact than any other movie that we've seen to date, including the bits that we've seen from Wonder Woman, which just doesn't seem to have much in the way of the mystical with it. There seems to just be an awful lot more weird powers and things like that aren't explained than the actual mystical elements that were actually touched on quite substantially in this film. But here's the thing. As with everything that we've got in the DC universe so far, the characterization of these characters, the actors that they've got to play them, the way that they've portrayed the characters, the way that they're costumed, and all the rest of it, not got any real issue with any of that. Because, these actors are good actors. They've done great jobs in other films. That's one of the reasons why they've been brought in on these big productions. But you had the reshoots that took place during Suicide Squad that were supposedly just to make the film better, but then also the story in Suicide Squad just wasn't really there. It was kind of... It was like a poor computer game. You had the team, the protagonist being inserted, running through a group of enemies, briefly talking to each other, like in depth kind of once, a couple of flashbacks because why not, and then the big boss fight at the end, and that was it. And it didn't impact the rest of the universe. It didn't do anything else, with the exception of a couple of those flashbacks just explaining some stuff to people. You could have had those flashbacks in movies that they were more pertinent to. But as a result, though, then you had you had people complaining about it. You had people kind of asking what the hell, why wasn't this kind of more of what it had originally been sold as, or what people expected it to be. You had the director going, well, yeah, there was a fair number of things that were taken away from me and stuff like that. And it's again, it turned into a bit of just a pot of meh, just because you had people messing around with it and like stepping in over the people that have been trusted to actually go and do right by the material and work with the actors and actually make all the stuff kind of function in a way that will, firstly, yes, earn money, but also will actually please the fans, make them want to see more, make them want to return, and then that leads us on to the two upcoming movies, both Wonder Woman and Justice League. And there have been a few things that have come out about these films to one extent or another. I mean, Wonder Woman had an awful lot of trouble with pinning down directors and things like that. But as a result, some of what I'm saying is going to be speculation. Some of what I'm saying is going to be comparative, purely based on trailers and various bits and pieces of information that have come out from other places so far. And so let's start off with Wonder Woman, as it's the next one that comes out. And with Wonder Woman, there have been an awful lot of kind of comparisons between Wonder Woman here and in her First World War setting, and the way that the action unfolds in Captain America from what the first Avenger, from what we've seen so far. And I feel like there's kind of fair comparisons, but I feel like one of the things that will stand out is Gal Gadot as Diana, kind of going through from her weird female-only peaceful world of warrior women into the actual world, the rest of the world at war, and those interactions are probably going to be the thing that make the difference. It's not the underdog that was downtrodden suddenly being able to make the difference that he's always wanted to make and doing it. It's going to be an outsider coming in and seeing all these things for the first time, which I feel might add a different level of depth to some of it if they've done it properly. I mean, the movie looks amazing, but then again, all of the movies have looked pretty good up to this point. And so the thing that I hope for with Wonder Woman is that again, they take their time with the story. They don't rush it. But again, some of the stuff that this movie is going to touch on will in no way really affect the rest of the DCEU, just simply due to the time period shift. Just this is jumping back in time by nearly a century now, and as a result, there may be a couple of things here and there that get kind of alluded to or kind of foreshadowed in one way or another, but for the most part, it's not going to be a big kind of rippling effect from this movie, which is one of the reasons why I hope they do well with it. One of the reasons why I hope that as a result of it being so separate, they can actually just relax and tell the story, because it will be the only movie that doesn't need anything to really roll into the next movies. It doesn't need to set up big things. We've already met Wonder Woman as a modern day character, so this is an origin story that just reinforces that. That's all you need. You need to showcase the character. And so with that, I'm hoping that they actually take the time to do it, because Wonder Woman is a good character. She's a character that adds a really interesting set of counterpoints in the big three in the Justice League to Superman and Batman, and she's almost at times the fulcrum on which the other two rest, depending on which stories you're reading. And so I'm hoping that that's the way that they start setting her up, that's the way that they start working with her a bit more. And I'm hoping, because that wasn't how she came across at all in Batman versus Superman. She just turned up because reasons. But in this case, I'm hoping that this reinforces that, and that's all it needs to do. It needs to be fun, it needs to showcase who she is, and it needs to demonstrate the kind of evolution that she had from naive princess to woman of the world, who has kind of fought a war, overcome evil, and moved forward to go on and do other bigger things. That's the stuff that I want to see in this movie. So we'll see about that. But then we've got the big one, the ensemble film. See, now this is the one that's had news come out about it the last few days, and it's Justice League. And as said, they look great. I'm a bit that I feel like Cyborg has been crowbarred in as kind of like a kind of token character that didn't necessarily need to be there. There are other characters that I feel they could have done more with than Cyborg, but obviously they're also looking at the more current run of comics, where Cyborg was changed from like a Teen Titan into being a kind of founding member of the Justice League, and so on and so forth. So if that's the way they want to play it, then fine. If it's more relevant to their current products, again, fair enough, to one degree or another. But here's the thing: we've had teases that maybe the Black Adam, as played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, may very well be in this film. We've had the suggestions that there are going to be all manner of things set up, more dark side stuff with the villain being Steppenwolf, and so there's a lot being kind of put on this movie as like, oh yeah, this might actually be a positive to kind of run with this. Maybe the actors being able to bounce off each other will make a bigger thing of it, will make it more relevant. Maybe we'll see Superman come back, and that'll be a big revelation. Maybe we'll see a whole other weird set of things going on. But then we've now had news a couple of days ago, I think I saw it, whereby the news has come out that the Justice League has gone back into reshoots now for the second time. And obviously the last time we saw this was with Suicide Squad, where it's seemingly been presented to some bigwigs around a kind of boardroom table, and they've taken a look and they've gone, no, we don't quite like that. It doesn't necessarily add up with some of our info from focus groups and from what we think will work. And so we'll take a vote. Yeah, we voted to go back and reshoot these things. And that's kind of what happened with Suicide Squad. This is now seemingly what's happening with Justice League, and it makes me nervous because the first trailer that we saw, the first proper trailer that we saw with the interplay between Aquaman and Batman, the interplay between Flash and Bruce Wayne, you've got an awful lot of interesting kind of dynamics there and things that kind of I would like to see them get right. Excuse me. I would like to see them get right. And again, this is their chance again to demonstrate that they're not just trying to catch up with Marvel, even though that seems to be their modus operandi at the moment. It's this is where they can go, we're not just trying to catch up, we're not just trying to chase down our competitors and try and take a big slice of the pie away from them, because let's face it, if you're a comic book fan, then there's a good chance you have seen all the Marvel movies and you will continue to go and watch these DC movies, if only in the hope that one of them will be good. Yeah? And so you've got Justice League that's going to be in competition with, probably more so than anything else, with the Avengers Infinity War, which has had coming on 20 movies in build up for Marvel, and is going to be this big spectacle and potentially leading on to a whole slew of other things for Marvel overall. And these guys don't have that level of build up. They've barely got out of the gate with some of these storylines that they have already started messing up. And now this again is their chance to give the people who have actually tried to bear with them the payoff on this great story, where they can then go, right, we have established the Justice League, now we can slow down, look at the stories that the Justice League have actually had, and we can start working on the universe as a whole. Yeah, instead of just picking out individual characters and throwing them together at will just to try and make something work, or trying to grab as many different impactful big popular storylines as possible and throwing them together again to hopefully make more money just by doing so. These are the things that I'm hopeful for. Again, the characterization, they've got some great actors playing the parts. They've got some very talented people on their various teams, both on the kind of production side and in terms of directing, and they've got enough money to throw around in terms of marketing and stuff anyway. They don't need to continually put people from the boardroom into this kind of wedge position between what the creative team are trying to make and then what they're trying to sell. Yeah? Remove the wedge, trust the people that you've kind of hired to do the job, and then maybe you'll get something really cool. Seeing some of the things that came out after Suicide Squad got released, where actors hadn't been informed that their scenes had been cut, or whatever else. There have been a few slip-ups in regards to that with the Fox side of the Marvel universe as well. With Anna Paquin's part as Rogue being cut without her knowledge until she found out on a panel or whatever it was. There are slip-ups elsewhere as well. DC, Warner Brothers aren't the only people who make these mistakes. But by God, are they making them with almost every single movie that they've gone through so far. And so, here's me hoping at the very least that they start trusting the people that they've hired to do the job and just letting them, do what they do. Because otherwise, again, we're just going to continually see how creativity by committee, this incredibly important thing, creativity as a whole is such an important thing to people, both in terms of stories and in terms of the way that they conduct themselves and adapt to life. Having this creativity by committee mindset come in and impact these things that are consumed by millions and millions and millions of people, and having them all be, all of those people's experiences be degraded by this. Think about the number of people that potentially could be inspired by seeing these films, and as a result then go on to want to make films like this by themselves in the future. Yeah, you're enriching an entire medium if you do a good job, potentially, because you're inspiring new people to come in and do a good job too. continuing to do this where you've got directors who are actively being prevented from making the thing that they want to make, the thing that they signed up to make, just for the sake of trying to squeeze more money out of people. You know, look at the number of cult classics that were incredibly unsuccessful when they first released, but then picked up a huge following after the fact and are now properties that are worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. You know, this is a property that is already worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, and one of the reasons that has transpired that that's the case is simply because there were lots of people who were creative, who had ideas, that they came in, they read the stuff, they wanted to have their own take on it, and then they did it. You know, how many, especially with things like Batman, how many different iterations of Batman have there been? You know, hundreds probably by now. And yet each one has either brought more people into looking into the whole franchise or the whole property, or they've been inspired to go and follow their own path with the character, or it's made the character just so much more diverse and open depending on which stories you like more, so that you've got more people coming in. You know, you've got these big properties, and they were built on creativity, on kind of the ingenuity and new ideas being brought in. Leaving it like this, where you've continually got people from some kind of corporate board coming back and dictating on these things, is only damaging it, and that's all we're actually seeing. You know, so there we go. There's my couple of cents on all of this with the DCEU, and again how this is impacting not only the DCEU's properties, and how kind of their movies have been pretty subpar and a bit kind of floaty and not really the best that they could be, and you know, it's also impacting both the people who are consuming it, the people who could be wanting to move into this industry if they had actually been inspired in the right way, but it's also impacting the rest of the industry, because it's suggesting that, you know, if you've either got people going, they're still making money even though the movies suck, so that means we don't need to put the effort in to still, you know, we don't need to care about the movie to make the money. We'll just make the money, you know. If we've got the right things to draw the right people, then that's all we need, and that's devaluing everything. But then also it's making, by comparison, the Marvel Universe stand out as a much stronger competitor than it probably actually is. And I love the Marvel movies, don't get me wrong, and you know, I've been very much enjoying them so far, but letting them freewheel just because they care about their product more than the money that the product is going to bring in a lot of instances. You know, they've got a lot of confidence in the fact their properties are going to bring in money already, so they just try and make what they need to make the stories run, to make the whole thing work. You know, there have been a couple of movies that have been pretty kind of connective tissue, kind of not great with Marvel, like Thor: The Dark World, for instance. That was just basically a segue from one movie into the next. But it still kind of amounted to, you know, that needed to be there. They took a hit on that because they knew they were going to have to take a hit on that just to link it up. And they did. And then the movies afterwards returned to form. They were very solid. They were, you know, really, really decent films. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of attempting to get, you know, really big hits just on, look at this shiny movie. And yeah, they're making money, but they're not being regarded well. And it's the regard of the people that are watching the films that you need to pay attention to, because eventually they'll just get tired and they just won't bother going to see it, because they will have seen every other movie and they will be disenfranchised by it. But anyway, those are my 2 cents. Those are my thoughts on the DCEU and the creativity by committee in this particular instance. I'd love to hear what you guys think. What did you think of the DC movies that have come out so far? What are your hopes for the ones that are coming up? You know, and otherwise, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop us a like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.